That's an honor song performed by Bob Goulet. He's an educator from the Nipissing First Nation of Northern Ontario. He sang and drummed to lift up the spirits of the 4,000 to 6,000 missing and murdered Indigenous children who didn't survive Canada's residential school system. Goulet performed it recently for Toronto's Congregation Haudenosaunee Synagogue at an event they put on not long after hundreds of graves of residential school children were discovered in BC and Saskatchewan in the summer. Today, Thursday, September 30th, is the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. The Liberal government chose to designate this new national statutory holiday to honour the lost children and to honour the thousands of survivors of residential schools, their families and communities. September 30th is also Orange Shirt Day in Canada. It's to honour a First Nations woman, Phyllis Webstab. When she was 6 years old, she wore a new orange shirt on her first day at a residential school in BC, but she was forced to strip and take it off. Well, that's not going to happen to the orange shirts that Bradley Okrant and Danelle Clark are wearing. He's Jewish, she's Anishinaabe. The couple will be proudly wearing their Every Child Matters shirts on Thursday, and so will their 3 daughters.
I don't want anyone in our family to have to go through any of the atrocities that on both sides, the Native side and the Jewish side, have experienced. We should be, at this point in the human history, we should be beyond that now.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Thursday, September 30th, 2021. Welcome to the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. Bradley Okrant grew up in the heavily Jewish community of Thornhill, Ontario. 10 years ago, after high school, he was accepted to a college film production program in Thunder Bay. Within weeks of arriving there, he met Danelle Clark, the granddaughter of a residential school survivor. They actually met through Facebook. At first, she didn't know he was Jewish. At first, he thought she was Asian. They've been together ever since. The couple lives in Beardmore, Ontario, which is a community of 250 people. It's where Danelle's from. She's a member of the Bingui Nayashi Anishinaabe First Nation, located on the Trans-Canada Highway, a 16-hour drive north of Toronto on Lake Nipigon. Although Bradley and Danelle knew hardly anything about each other's cultures when they met, they've discovered the legacy of racism and genocide that has impacted both their peoples over the generations. Coming up, you'll meet them and hear how he confronts the challenges of being the only Jewish man for miles around, while she deals with prejudice against Indigenous people and her family's legacy as survivors of the residential school system. But first, here's what's making news elsewhere in Canada right now.
This is Tamar Freeman from Vancouver, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like.
Israeli police detained a Canadian Jewish woman Monday at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Old City. It happened after Lauren Isaacs pulled an Israeli flag out of her bag at the site. Isaacs is the national director of Cherut in Canada. It's a right-wing movement that espouses unapologetic Zionism. It was founded by Menachem Begin in 1948. Israel captured the Temple Mount area in the '67 war, but allows Jordanian authorities to oversee the site. It's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is located, but it's also the site thought to be where the first and second temples stood, so it's holy to Jews as well. Jews are allowed there under heavy police escort at certain times of the week, but any display of religious symbols is not allowed. Now, Monday isn't the first time Isaacs has pulled this kind of flag event. She went live on Facebook on Wednesday from Israel to talk about why she did it. It's not clear what charges, if any, she is facing. Danelle Clark's ancestors were forced off their land twice, first in the 50s, when government hydro work flooded their homes, and then for good in 1960 when the Ontario government kicked them all out to create a provincial park. Danelle's grandfather and his brother were sent to a residential school in Thunder Bay, likely St. Joseph's. In recent years, the band is slowly starting to reclaim their land. This summer, in Beardmore, where Bradley and Danelle live, there was a boil water advisory, and the smoke from wildfires kept everybody indoors. So they took their girls to Thornhill to visit family in late August, where I had the chance to interview them. So tell us a little bit about the legacy of residential school in your own family. First of all, Danelle, I know you've talked a bit about it on Facebook a little bit.
I'm not sure what the name was, but anyone who has Google can look it up. It was the only residential school in Thunder Bay where my grandfather and his oldest brother were sent to. Again, their parents were addicts into drinking. His mother had died of cirrhosis of the liver. So, you know, the lineage of alcoholism and addiction goes back forever with us. And it's everywhere. But again, they lived out in the bush in the middle of nowhere where his father had worked, you know, back in the day where wood and everything was a big thing up there. So they got sent out to residential schools. They spent most of their young years, from what I understand, there. And they have many stories of running away, being caught, being brought back, you know, the whole sad story of, you know, looking out the window and mom and dad are coming to get us. But when he was in residential school, he suffered a lot of abuse, and
he doesn't talk about
it very much.
But there's one story about the boy who always peed his bed.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to mention that story.
Yeah, he said specifically he didn't get beat on, but he's also a very light-skinned, green-eyed person. He doesn't look very native if you look straight on at him. But he always told me this one story, that there was a boy because they all just had beds lined up in a big room, you know, kid after each other in a bed. But he said a boy who was in a bed close to him would often wet his bed, and they would like grab his face and shove it in it and like, you know, make him clean it up, and he'd have to do it every day. Like, and he said the kids would get together and try to help him clean it up before any of the adults found it, because to avoid from him getting beat or whatever else they were going to do. And it was definitely a traumatizing time for all these kids.
So all the stuff that you know, and Bradley, you came into this family. How aware were you when you first moved to Thunder Bay about the abuse that happened in Thunder Bay, even the last few, 4 years, as well as the personal specific stories about your wife's family?
No, and that's the sad fact. I was completely ignorant to all this going on. And in fact, when I moved up and she's telling me all about racism and how it's hard for the natives, and I'm thinking, well, how can that be? I said, we're in the 21st century now. Is racism supposed to be long gone? Of course, there's, stuff happening in the States and, all over the place, but compared to how it was, and I was like surprised to see that this is still an ongoing thing all the time. It hasn't changed at all.
Oh, I can't walk into a shopping store in Thunder Bay. I can't walk in without them following me, or security following me around, watching what I do and stuff like that.
No, and her brother actually is a very good example. He wore suits to high school every day to show everybody he was different, so they wouldn't look at him as categorize him as another native. At one point, it was almost like he was ashamed.
No.
So let's talk about the Jewish aspect. When you met Bradley, right? Did you know about the legacy of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism? What did you know?
Well, when I was growing up, my grandparents used to tease me. I was raised in a Christian home, and my grandparents used to tease me that I'm going to find a nice Jewish guy one day, and that will be my husband. So sure enough, it worked out.
Yeah.
But growing up, I never really knew too much except about the Holocaust. You learn about that in school, and all the movies there are to it behind it. So I had a little bit of knowledge, but I don't think I met anyone Jewish before in my life before him. I don't know, like now that I've been around it so much, I can kind of tell when someone's a little bit Jewish and stuff, but like
getting your Jewish radar going. All right,
yeah.
So tell me about your shirts. You're wearing orange shirts. I didn't ask you to wear them.
No, we did anyway.
Your whole family's wearing them.
A friend of mine who lives in Rocky Bay, the reserve near Beardmore, when this all started coming out, she owns a little company where she sells clothes and stuff. she made these shirts and was selling them. And whatever she made for profit, she would donate to an organization that was helping all these residential school findings and stuff like that. So as soon as she did that, I wanted to order for everyone, for the family and everything. And I thought it was important for us to wear it. On Canada's Day, we wore them all. And on the 30th, we'll wear them. And we plan on wearing them when we go to Wonderland. I don't mind showing it off. The more people that see it, maybe the more awareness it'll bring.
What is that like, having 3 daughters who are Indigenous/Jewish?
I've said multiple times, I won't move back to Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay has got so bad. And, it's the main city in Northern Ontario. So all the reserves and everything, people are always coming down to Thunder Bay for, shopping or medical reasons or anything like that. But it had, like, the crime and the drugs and everything has gotten so bad. And the racism, I don't want to raise Native girls there.
It wasn't too long ago, a Native woman died because a group
Barbara
of kids,
Kenter, yes, she was known in my family.
Threw trailer hitch at her, and they thought it was funny. And as they drove off, one of the guys said, "I hit one," and this is the kind
that
of
was Bushby. He got 8 years just now, or just recently. He got sentenced to 8 years.
Clearly, that kid. I mean, maybe it's from his experiences, maybe it's from his friends, maybe it's from his family. And the problem is that all it takes is one group of people to start spreading this hate, and then everybody else spreads the hate. And as a Jew, knowing how far it can go, right? And so when I hear stuff that's racist towards natives, it really pisses me off, because I don't want anyone in our family to have to go through any of the atrocities that on both sides, the native side and the Jewish side, have experienced. We should be, at this point in the human history, we should be beyond that now. We should be past, all this hate. And the sad thing is that you're never going to be away from hate. There's always going to be people who don't like you because you're different or whatever. And then having children grow up in this type of world that, you
just don't want that for them.
And, they're going to be stereotyped because they're Jewish, and they're going to be seen as cheap or whatever the case is. But then also there's brown skin. They're very clearly brown skin, and they're going to be stereotyped because they're native, right? And it sucks, because they're going to have to try harder than everybody else to prove that they're not what people think of them, right? Which is sad. No one should have to try harder to prove you're a productive member of society,
You started counting on your Facebook page when they started finding graves, and you kept the running score. I don't know, that's not the right word, but I've been watching, why did you do that? And how has it been to see this summer, the discoveries of these graves for you both?
My heart has hurt a lot in the last little bit. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting how much. And I think I wrote down the numbers, actually. We're in the 6,000s already. 6,000.
I went to see some concentration camps when I was 17. I went to Poland, I went to Auschwitz, and they had a case with all the shoes. And there was a little girl shoe, tiny little white shoe right in the front. And I'm sure they placed it there on purpose. But it was a very heavy heart hitting moment when you realize not everybody was safe from the trauma and the pain. And so when they're discovering all these children, it's their children, they're not grown-ups, they're not
graves, they're
they
thrown in
were
a hole
children,
on top of each other,
all ages, 5 years old, 4 years old, 10
some
years
young
old,
as 2, like babies being
thrown
chucked
into
in a hole.
ditch and covered, and that was it.
We're at 6,502 out of 20 places that they searched so far, and there was 139 schools in Canada.
And it's never been a secret to the atrocities that the residential schools had. And, it's not like this is unheard of information. We knew the whole time that residential schools were bad. Well, I knew as soon as I got into the community. But what's bringing this so to light is the magnitude, is that all these children that were just shoved into a pile and buried, not marked, and families not notified, hidden away from the rest of the world, like they didn't matter. And that's that's the part that connects the Jewish history with the native histories. They were seen as vermin, just like how the Jews were. That diseased, there was something wrong with them. And the whole point of the residential schools was to beat the demon out of them, right? That was the whole point of
They were dirty. Yeah.
Tried to wash them clean. They would be deloused and everything, trying to
scrubbed with bleach and stuff like that, trying to clean everybody. And
because they were seen as, like Danelle said, dirty or unclean, and that's which just is, you're only one step away from a complete genocide. And then now we're finding all these children that are being dug up, and you realize this was a genocide. It wasn't on the verge of being one. It was a genocide for the children.
Well, this summer, the Canadian government brought in, for the first time, I know that Orange Shirt Day existed for a while, but now it's going to be a federal statutory holiday. Is called National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It's a new federal holiday. What do you make of that? Is that important to you at all? Does it help you? Does it, how do you feel about this?
I love that, again, it's being recognized. All over Canada now, people will have another holiday, and maybe they'll learn about why it's a holiday.
Yeah.
And again, the truth or the history behind it. And awareness, again, there's just people learning about it. I don't mean to say this any rudely or anything, but a lot of white people don't know about what Natives have been through or what we're going through.
I should tell you that being the only Jewish person for miles has also been a challenge for Bradley Okrant. And it's not just because he has to improvise making the traditional Jewish holiday foods because he can't get it up there, except when his mom ships up boxes of matzo ball mix and those little yellow croutons. But he also has had to face what he refers to as innocent racism. Comments and jokes made around him about the Holocaust, about showers, about burning in fires and things like that. And when these things happen, he tells the people it's not okay and why. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. We're soon going to mark a very special milestone here at the CJN Daily podcast. It'll be our 100th episode. It'll be at the end of October, so I'm launching a contest today. You could be interviewed on the show, but you've got to write to me and tell me why you have a good story to tell. We'll pick the winner from our contest entries. My email is ebessner@thecjn.ca. So that's ebessner at all one word at thecjn.ca, or just find me on Facebook. And we'll end the episode with more from Bob Goulet, the Anishinaabe educator we heard at the opening performing the honor song, about what you could do for National Truth and Reconciliation Day.
I do urge each and every one of you, as you begin or continue your work in reconciliation, to do one of a number of things. I ask you to commit to lifelong learning about Indigenous peoples. Take a look at Chapter 4 of Unmarked Graves in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report. Read the stories that are contained in the TRC's final report and get to know those 94 calls to action. The second call that I'm asking you is to begin or continue your role in being an ally. Learn about what it means to be an ally, to show that support and that unconditional love and respect that you have for all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And finally, I do ask you to put down your tobacco, offer your prayers, offer your words to the Spirit. No matter what spirit you identify with, no matter how you call the Spirit, to do that in a good way. And think of those families, those communities, and the loved ones who are remembering and who are hurting at this time in mourning the loss of those that didn't come back from residential schools.